is unquote. I know it's a French word, but for us, fighting for the fascist and far right, this deja vu, isn't it? I mean, it's not our first protest, right? Now, the reason why I start with that is because sometimes there can be pessimism and actually a writing off of the working class inside the country. The idea that as soon as a racist comes along with an idea of race division, that they're automatically won't accept it. But actually, it's a contested argument. It's a fight. And actually, ruling class always consistently try to push the argument there's nothing we can do. We just have to accept their rule. No, why do I say that? Does anybody remember David Cameron going to Munich on the eve of the UCL march, right? And saying, this country segregated into two parts. Nobody will say that. He then followed it up by saying that multiculturalism has failed. What did that do? That opened the door to these people. I'm not saying they're to blame, but when they say it's come from nowhere, let's not say it came from nowhere. The demonisation of migrants and Muslims came from the top of our society and be consistently fed. On the television, you can see a man called Trevor Phillips. I don't know if you saw it. He's on TV today, right? Personally, I need to stick clear. I hate Trevor Phillips. His only contribution is to close down the Commission for Racial Equality and then write a book saying we're sleepwalking into segregation. When he interviewed Farage, he goes, I'm astonished about what you're saying. Man, he's repeating what you said 2 or 3 years ago inside your book and legitimised it and opened it up. So don't pretend to be surprised. It was called scapegoating then. We said at the time, when Camping did it, be careful when you set fire to an area. You do not know how that fire is going to spread and how that fire is going to end. And of course, it fell again to the left to fight off the EDL. And let's remind ourselves, I actually know most of the car parks in the heart of this country. I can shut my eyes, find a small car park somewhere, and I'll be standing there with 10 or 20 people shouting down as thousands of people from the EDL go past and say this. And when that happened, people started off by saying we're too small. And commiserations to the comrades that when Tom Robinson and Therese several weeks ago and we were outnumbered. It's not the first time we've been outnumbered. I was just to say that as soon as the fascists raise their hand, a million viewers are on the street and they're on coin. That's not how it works. There's a struggle, there's a process involved in it, and there's a method in that. And what we have to do is we have to remember, we have to explode every myth around migrants, around Muslims, around refugees. And I'm going to read it again. Islamophobia is not a victimless crime. Anybody in Finsbury Park Mosque, when you go to the mosque, you know what they always say to you? Do you remember when that guy Osborne tried to drive a truck and kill one of the people that were worshipping there? When you go to up to Yorkshire, they say to you, do you remember Mukhtar Ali, a man that was in a mixed relationship, was stabbed to death by 2 EDL members? That's what they say to you. Yesterday, I was so proud that a group of Muslim women came to the tent demonstration. And you know what they told me? They told me that they're glad what we're doing because the amount of attacks that have taken place in their sisters. One of them told me that her friend that was in Walthamstow, a car stopped and they said cross the road and then they ran them both over and then reversed back over them. And then when they went to the police said there's no further action you can take because there's nothing that we can do. There's one of our comrades, he was here, was in a fish and chip shop. You can't get much more British than being in a fish and chip shop. And she had her hijab ripped off. One of the things we have to do is to make sure that every one of these crimes against Muslim women is exposed. And I tell you, you know when you see Jess Phillips, you remember Jess Phillips, but as he said, he attacked the people who were trying to defend the mass murder that took place in Gaza by voting in defense of women. What about the Palestinian women? What about the Palestinian babies? And what about the women in my constituency who have any drugs this time? She's not a voice for them, is she? She's a voice for imperialism when that takes place. But I think we have the potential to stop them. And I think we have to remember the high points. I remember being in Tower of Happiness when they said, the EDL said it was going to march through Tower of Happiness. They didn't. And the reason why that didn't happen is because it was a year-long campaign to make the necessary links to be able to do that. Also, by the way, there's cater experience industry. There's Paul Walker, who formed the anti-Nazi League. You bet his head in shame. One, it doesn't look like music, but he always reminds of Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus, those people that know us from the Romans, was a Roman leader that led the Roman army. I'm against the Jews. They led the Roman army to defeat those people that were attacking them. And as soon as he led the Roman army, he went back to be someone who was building a farmer, someone building the organisation. He did say, I want high office, I want to OBE, I want to be Sir Paul O'Brien. He built like that, but he didn't do that. He carried on building on the ground. And we stand on the foundations of. There's nothing that sitting there. And when people tell you that you can't build a movement from where we are, nothing that builds seats against the EDL, but also to build a youth movement, because there's a potential for it. There's a bigger potential now. If you're somebody young, I'm sorry, I think you're using a lot of time, sorry, if you're somebody young, you've been treated like shit, right? When I was young, when I went to university, I got a grant. I got a special pass because I came from East London, saying you've got to go home extra. Here's a travel allowance. I got a book allowance, which I didn't use on books. I got a travel allowance to do that. I didn't spend all my grant money in the first 4 weeks. So then I got housing benefit and income support, right? This isn't in a parallel multiverse universe, yeah? This was right here. And we've been robbed of every single part of that. That migrants are to blame. My mom was a migrant. She was, and that's the other thing you have to think. They said there's economic migrant stuff. If you want to be an economic migrant, go meet a nurse, a doctor, someone who's living in the hospital. That's what you can find. Ask who's looking after grandma. We should literally put a little sticker up there. Ask who's looking after grandma. NQ is a migrant worker, and we should celebrate this, and we should allow them to accept and push the narrative. We've got to fight in every single trench that we've got, and we've got an advantage. The organised working class is the bulwark against the growth of fascism inside this country, and we're connected to that. And I keep using the example that we had the mass movement on the street in Tower Hamlets, the mass movement on the street in Morningside, but we also had something else. We had the organised working class people doing something. You know the CWU? Well, the BNP tried to deliver its influence and it was at its heights. The postal workers took a decision that they needed a bonfire because they just hunted that leaflet. Guess how they heated themselves? Yes, they did it with the leaflets. It was from the BNP. In other words, there's the collective force that we can use to mobilise in order to do that. They don't drive the buses. They don't clean our streets. They don't do any of those things. And we can organise each union to support what we're trying to do. It matters, every union banner that's on the demonstration on that, against Tommy Robinson. Why do we know this? Firstly, there isn't two-tier policing. Actually, there is two-tier policing, but not for the reasons that Tommy Robinson says, right? When the police are deployed, they're not deployed against the fascists, they're deployed against us. Every number matters. Every number matters on that day, and politically it matters. I always know the difference when you go in a demonstration when you got the question for picking or not. Because when I first get there, the first thing, and this will know about this a lot, First thing they say to me, I'm going to arrest you. Right? And before you, what have I done? I'm going to arrest you, right? If there's lots and lots of numbers there, they go, how can I facilitate conservative? That's why it matters how many people we get on the demonstration on the day. And it matters what our demonstration looks like. If in the heart of our demonstration is a block for Palestine, it means that there's a link between the mass Palestinian movement and our demonstration. And we owe it as well to the French organisations that are fighting against much bigger odds than us. Today there's going to be an election. And I can't guarantee for the first time since Adolf Hitler was elected as Chancellor that we don't end up with a Prime Minister in France. That is, I think, a pro-term family. We think RN is a fascist organisation. But what we can guarantee is that we can have a struggle against those people and we can deny the possibilities of people like Robinson getting to... First, quick thing to say that a part of Robinson's growth is that, you know, I've got to read down and I'll pop on the name of the guy. But it's not true that it's just that he takes the streets. He's had support from the right. There's 2 ex-Tory MPs that are going on the demonstration. So in other words, he's trying to build a bridge to the reform people in order to have a pincer movement that challenges us. And our job is to stop those bridges from being built. I remember when I was a kid, people used to say to me, I don't mind racism. About the people who came out and beat me up and chased me around the street. That's because that's their answer. Right? when that happens, yeah, what you want is an army, as many people on your side. You're not feeling like, come on, link your arms, yeah? I've had a disagreement with you, but don't worry about that today, right? We link arms and we fight these people, right? That's the method of the United Front. It doesn't mean you don't argue with the people next to you, but what we have to do, the question of the Labour Party. We work against the Labour Party when it pursues racism, but we also work with them in the sense that they've managed, Keir Starmer has, built an index of 9 billion, we've got 9 billion people vote for him. We want those 9 million people to support the anti-racist movement. That's the truth of it. And that's what we have to argue for the 9 million to support the movement, but we also have to argue the kernel of it has got to be a radical, active movement. I would really love it if we did a speaking tour with Jeremy Corbyn and the rest of the people that stood against him, together with the trade union leaders and the Muslim leaders to say enough is enough. We don't reform those people to build. We should build those kind of things. In fact, in autumn, one of the things that's starting to happen is that the fascists are starting to go to the centre of our towns. Remember before they used to go to the outskirts, like Barking, they were steered to go into the centre. Notice how reform went to Birmingham. And Tommy Robinson talking about going to the centre of London. They've changed their tactics slightly by going to the centre because they're trying to do the grand thing. We have to break that momentum and push them back by making sure that they're not able to, I'm sorry, right. I'm going to finish up on my thing. We have to build anti-racist citadels. Every camp that's against Palestine, every university, every college, everything that we could build has been we're able to destroy the people that are trying to break us. I remember the Barking and Dagenham, the board, they said that you would never keep the BNP. And then I remember the would-be Führer crying. And they tried to put a curtain up. He sent it, Berlin and tried to put a curtain up around, because you know they've got this macho idea, red don't cry. Yeah? And they decide what gender people are. And the Führer was crying, because we've broken through the mass movement by organisation. We're going to have to break Farage, and we're going to have to break Robinson. But I do give this caveat warning. The scales and the stakes are much higher than they've ever been. You see, when we were taking on the BNP, there wasn't the chance that Donald Trump was going to be the President of the United States. There wasn't the chance that inside Austria, the leader of the President was going to be a Nazi. Today, there is that danger. So we have to couple with a bigger idea as well, an idea about the future. As well as fighting back the fascist scum, as well as fighting back the racist populists, we have to give the idea that a small seat of resistance with the 5 people that stood against New Labour are part of the future of building an active movement that's talking about changing the world. And that includes the question of socialism, that includes the question of working people making decisions for themselves. Let's build a united front, but also let's have our eye on the future, because these rats keep coming back. Let's destroy the sewer of capitalism that produces them and make sure that we fight through. The 27th is the start, but it's the beginning for a much bigger fight overall to change our society.
Thank you, that was very. I'll give this for I don't know the place.
Well, the question I would ask is Britain going down the road of Europe? The French electoral result later tonight, whatever the result, will confirm that the cordon sanitaire around the fascists and the far right has well and truly broken down across Europe. And don't think, by the way, if the Rassemblement National, don't think, even if they don't win a majority, don't think that's the end of the crisis in France. If it's a hung parliament, there are 3 options on the table. One is that they install a technocrat, someone like Christine Lagarde from the IMF, as French president. The second is that they find a figure which both left and right can get behind, and Francois Hollande is being sceptic because his presidency went so well when he set the record for being the most unpopular French president in history. And the third option is that Macron will evoke Article 16 and will completely bypass Parliament. So any of those 3 solutions are not going to see the end of the RN and their growth. If anything, it will fuel them further. And it's not just about the RN in France, it's about the way in which their surge in the elections completes the picture where across Europe now it is the norm for fascist or far-right parties to be vying for the leadership in the polls, to be vying to top the polls. If you look in Austria, the Freedom Party are likely to win the general election which comes up in September. This is an organisation tracing its roots directly back to the Nazis. If you look in Germany, the AfD, an organisation with a neo-Nazi wing, gets 15% nationally and 30% in some of the regions of East Germany. And if you look in Italy, Meloni is already the Prime Minister, someone who traces a political tradition back to Mussolini. What I think we have to understand is how can we get here? How do we get to a situation where 70 odd years on from the horrors of the Holocaust you have this situation in Europe? And here it's crucial to recognise that the role of mainstream parties, both conservative and social democrats, in legitimising the politics of racism has fuelled the growth of those parties that I talked about. So if you look at France, what's the response of Nicolas Sarkozy, Francois Hollande and of Macron to the growth of the RN? It's to bring through and invoke a series of vicious Islamophobic policies, to bring in bans on what Muslim women can wear, to attack migrants, to attack the sans-papiers, the people without papers. And as Jean-Marie Le Pen said many years ago, why vote for an imitation when you can vote for the originals? In other words, the mainstream parties echo and give legitimacy to the policies of the right. This is a context, I think, which we are having a discussion about what we're going to do in Britain, about Farage, and about the threat of Tommy Robinson. And it's important to say Britain is not in the same place as Europe yet. But the all warning signs are there. And election night is the biggest warning we've had so far. For the first time in Parliament, there is a hard right bloc to the right of the Tory party, or for far left wing down. That's the first time that's happened. Richard Tice, Farage, Lee Anderson, and the other 2, I can't quite remember, but presumably they're rich businessmen like those 3. And if you look at that context, that it is important to say that there are differences in Britain. Farage is not Marine Le Pen. Farage is not from the same stock. Marine Le Pen and the Rassemblement National, the Front National, come from the fascist tradition. They directly trace their roots back to the Second World War. They do have street gangs and build a street movement, and they also pursue the electoral strategy. Nigel Farage is different from that tradition. I'm not saying he's a nice guy by any means. He comes from a different political tradition. If you look at Farage, he comes from really the sort of Eurosceptic Little Englanders, which Europe was the main drive of their political ambition in the 1990s and in the 2000s. However, if you look at Farage's project, really since 2010, he has chosen to broaden out that appeal, not just about Euroscepticism, but to use hard racism to try and drag British politics to the right. And it is important, I think, to look at the different ways he's tried to do this, and particularly the language he's used to try and drag British politics to the right. So in 2008, Farage openly makes a speech praising Enoch Powell. Enoch Powell in his Rivers of Blood speech, but the Rivers of Blood speech, the prime way of the sacked from the Tory cabinet. In 2014, Farage made comments about not wanting to live next door to Romanians, for fear of what that would be like. In 2015, he said that Muslims lacked British values and would struggle to assimilate into British society. And during Black Lives Matter in 2020, Farage talked about the BLM movement being the birth of a new Taliban when the streets was written. That process of injecting racism into mainstream British discourse, or political discourse, and by the way, it's helped a lot, by the way, by the fact he's on Question Time every other week, and the BBC give you a platform. That project that Farage has, that has accelerated in the last few years. Particularly, he's tied himself to Trump. You look at the loving they have on Twitter, and Trump saying he'd come and visit Clapton if he could visit Britain. This is what Trump said the other day. But also, in this election campaign, and the few months before it, Farage, I think, has stepped through another barrier where he has embraced the language of the international far right. Look at his interventions into this election. Not only the most blatant Islamophobia, the discussion with James Phillips that Wendy talked about, but an absolute focus on the boats coming across the channel. You see this on Farage's Twitter. He goes out on a boat, doesn't he, and points at refugees on diggies and etc. But it's also important, and I don't know if Thomas Fossum and social workers in the room, but if you look at the speeches, and social workers done a bit of analysis on this, if you look at the speeches Farage gives, if anyone can bear to actually watch a half-an-hour speech from Nigel Farage, although he didn't get very far the other day when... If you look at his recent speeches, it is the racism, but he also starts talking about globalism. And this is the hallmark of the international far right, to rail in a fake way against capital and finance to make appeals really to the lower middle class. So that's his project, and it has accelerated at pace in the last few months. And significantly, another term that Farage has been using is he's been talking about a people's army. He keeps using this phrase. Now, this is not a fascist street movement in the same way that Le Pen and others have built. But when he talks about people's army, who's he talking about? Look at the Channel 4 documentary. He's talking about the man who said that the territorial army should use migrants on the beach as target practice. He's talking about his own, I believe it was a plane staffer, who said that the pride flag was a degenerate flag. That's the kind of people's army that Farage wants. It's dangerous. And of course, someone who wants to be in his people's army is Tommy Robinson. Look at Tommy Robinson's Twitter over the last few weeks. It is full of love and adoration for Nigel Farage. Robinson has invited Nigel Farage to come and speak on the 27th of July demonstration. Now, I don't think that will happen, because Farage still wanted to keep his distance from Robinson, who people in this room have managed to label as a Nazi for years. But still, you can see a dangerous cocktail there, can't you? You can see where Farage is looking and learning from Trump, he's learning from Europe, and he's giving confidence to the racists on the ground, the kind of people that we saw in that documentary. Again, how have we got here? The answer lies in the fact that although it's not as pronounced as Europe, mainstream parties, in response to the crisis in society, in response to the way in which the 2008 crisis and after has eroded their electoral base, have turned towards hard racism, particularly the Tory party. The Windrush scandal, the blatant Islamophobia, to be honest, Prithvi Patel and then someone at government took that onto a new level, didn't they, about what it was acceptable for a Home Secretary to say. An invasion on the South Coast, threats from Muslims, the cultural wars, and so on. I think that process of racism at the top of society is going to accelerate. What is the Tory take-home from the election? It's that they weren't hard enough. The Tory debrief will say we lost all our votes to reform, and therefore we need to be harder. We need to be harder on racism. We need to be harder on trans rights. We need to talk about stopping the votes even more. And therefore, what I think is possible, and I think no one can tell when it happened, it's possible in Britain that we will see a similar process which has gone on in the United States with the Republican Party. Think about how Trump has taken the base of the Republican Party in a very quick space of time and dragged the whole politics to the right. Think about how in 2012 Mitt Romney is a Republican candidate, and by 2016 the Republicans are totally taken over by Trump. That kind of process could take place in Britain, and we have to say that we have no hope that Keir Starmer is going to offer any challenge to this. If anything, the Starmer government is going to make concessions to these kinds of arguments. So it is a dangerous situation, and therefore I want to spend the last time I've got by talking about what we're going to do about it. It seems to me that the 27th of July, the demonstration against Tommy Robinson, is an important opportunity for us to hit back against this. In fact, it is a crucial date for us to do this. And the reason why is because at the moment we have Farage facing or running a strong electoral challenge, 4 million votes. If we get to a situation in Britain where there's also a street movement of the far right, that's a very dangerous cocktail. If you want to understand the rise of Alternative for Deutschland in Germany, look at the Pegida street movement of a few years ago. It was a central thrust in terms of normalising their politics. So for us, the 27th of July is about smashing Robinson and saying that in this climate, we are not going to allow a fascist street movement to grow in Britain. That is a huge task for us. For that demonstration, we have to say that it is going to be a day of unity to show we're not going down the road of Europe. And therefore, we want the biggest, broadest mobilisation possible. We want to get as many MPs, as many unions, as many organisations, as many Palestine groups, the student camps, trade unions. We want all of them on the streets on the 27th of July. And we should be optimistic about doing that. We should recognise that in Britain, there has been an insurgent movement on the streets for Palestine, mostly led by Muslim women, and it shows the appetite, and the votes at the election of the independent candidate shows the appetite that people have for the politics of hope rather than the politics of despair. And it is up to the people in this room and at this festival if the 27th of July can achieve that. But alongside that, clearly, we have the job to challenge racism on the top of society. We've got to smash Robinson, but we now have to challenge Farage. And to do that, we have to avoid some of the approaches that we've seen on the left. It goes without saying, we have to avoid the kind of politics of the workers' party in George Dialogue, which says that you make mistakes. We also have to avoid the argument, and I think Glynch put this the other day, which is to someone we want on the demonstration on the 27th of July, of saying that we can't patronise working class people, that we have to listen to their concerns. If anything, we have to put a robust challenge against racism, and one way I think we should do that is in the party conference season in the autumn, Reform will be having a national conference. I think we should call a national demonstration outside there. And what is crucial, and this is what I'll finish on in the time I've got left, What is crucial in all of this is we've got to say we need anti-capitalist politics at the heart of this movement, because there is a big pressure, whether you're in France, whether you're in the US, there is a big pressure and an argument to ally with the centre ground to try and stop the rise of the far right. This is what they say in France, isn't it? You have to vote Macron to stop Le Pen. And we have to say that you can't ally against racism with the people who have been spouting racism from the top and legitimising the far right. And we also have to say that this strategy hasn't worked. For 30 years now in France, they've said, block with Sarkozy, block with Chirac, where has it got us? The street movement has grown and grown. And therefore our argument has to be that what is necessary is mass mobilisations from below. The Palestine movement is an example about how insurgent mobilisations on the streets, in the workplaces, on universities, can shape the political debate in society. That's what we have to do with anti-racism. We have to create a movement which smashes Tommy Robinson and also calls Farage out for being a racist, and that's why it's so important we disrupt this conference. Everywhere Farage goes, we should try and disrupt it. Get on the mailing list and try and do it. We want that kind of stuff. All of this, I think, is an urgent task. But I want to argue that we will get nowhere with pessimism. We do face a threat, but I think we should be optimistic about how we can beat it back. We're not in Europe 1936. Even in France, to be honest, French comrades talk about this. You face the massive threat of Le Pen, but there were 800,000 people out in demonstrations recently. Last year, a mass strike wave, the protests against the Darwin law. There is an opportunity to mobilise people, and in Britain, whether it's Palestine, whether it's BLM, whether it's the votes in the elections for the independents, there are big numbers of people who I think we can draw into this project. But to do that, it requires building the broadest possible unity, the united front tactic at the heart of it, but it also requires the sharpest possible politics of arguing what Weyman said, that unless we have a politics which doesn't ally with the centre, but takes on the system as well, that's the kind of politics we need to beat Farage and Robinson. So we do face a big challenge, but I hope that comrades in this room and elsewhere are up for that challenge and are confident that we can deliver it.
So I just wanted to say, obviously Farage takes him on trajectory. He's looking at what's left in terms of work when he takes instead of fail. And they talk about winning of decisions that they within their more MPs in the future. And I think it's really important to stay your client efforts alone. And I say that because let's look back to what we've done in the past. We had the BFPs. We had BFP councillors in Deborah's places. In the northwest, we had Dick Griffin, who was our member of the Building Parliament. And I remember the night they had a doubt, and I think it's really important. All how we won. We stood outside that trial and we made as much as the conflict. At the point of then, he won a seat and he went up on the stage, all the other politicians walked off. And it was interesting because the MP said to me, MEP said to me afterwards, that said, it's because we could hear you in the cow and we knew you had to come out and face you. They did it because they were principled. Let's be very clear about it. They did it because they knew that we were out on the street. So what we do matters, and I think the fact that we were able to disrupt Farage's press conference is really important because it shows what we can do. We have an absolute responsibility to make sure that wherever he goes, he gets the welcome he deserves. Because the entire 4 years that Dick Griffin was our European Member of Parliament, he wasn't able to do a single meeting at any major city that he represented. I mean, you said that the second day, on the night of the tower, you couldn't get in the building. Let's start with that first. They had to take him to the basement because the police couldn't protect him. I didn't think there was that many others, but it turns out it's not that hard. But on the night he lost his seat, he didn't wait for the count to finish. All his bodyguards, all his security walked off, and he was in tears. He looked very bad, and I can say, as an anti-racist campaigner, that was one of the best ideas night on Farage is a threat, so is Tommy Robinson. We have to make sure that on the 27th of July, that demonstration is as big as possible, because they had 5,000 on the streets last time they were in London. They did double that in Pontypridd. So we have responsibility that if we can make sure we are as big as possible against him and show him just how toxic he is, we can stop Farage and Trump. Sorry, shall I say Trump? It won't be connecting up. Because I think what Robinson wants is he wants to be the foot shoulders. He wants to make street movement for Farage's movement in Parliament. And we need to make sure we smash that. But we can only do it if we leave this conference, this event, knowing what we've got to do. We need to be the biggest mass movement that we see. When we stopped Robinson getting elected in the European in the local press, we did it through a task organisation of the strength of the trade union movement. I stand up to racism. We have groups across the country. We could, though, have done it without the trade union support. Not just their financial support, but their members across the Northwest who leafleted every town and city across the Northwest. That's how we do it, in unity and strength of trade union movement.
So I think a lot of what he says is correct, but I think we risk being complacent with a lot we're discussing. So the working class isn't a homogeneous block, it's not a single block, it's millions of people in Britain, and there's a lot of variation across the world, and we risk alienating a lot of people in that group, for which I count myself, by having one uniform opinion on matters like strikes, immigration, refugees, and I speak as a refugee myself from Kurdistan. My parents came here in the late 90s to escape from war, hunger and poverty, so it's a very real thing, and it's not to diminish that. But if we antagonize working class people, middle class people, and assume that our opinions are the right ones, that there's no space for legitimate opposition, we are going to fuel a Farage, a Trump, and Robinson. Because it's a very forward thing to say they're not listening to us, they're shouting us down, they're calling us fascists. Especially ordinary people who aren't fascists, who have some concerns, who have some worries, and we have to recognise that's legitimate. Because if we don't, everything which we fight for all will be lost, and that will be our fault. Thank
you. Just on that thing about universal rights, you have one thing really, which is standard for most of the Washington really. And then within that you have discussions. I just wanted to talk a bit about in the speeches those were doing, we were talking about sustainability organisation, and I wanted to talk a bit about what we're doing in Haringey and Anzi, because if you're in a position and you're hearing it from around the country, I hope can listen to speak all the time in this school actually, but we're in a tradition and it goes back, yes, back to Cable Street, but also there was an actually quite a big anti-slavery campaign in this country eventually. Belatedly, but eventually, and there was an anti-slavery group in every town, in every little coastal town. They weren't just made of things, and I think that's what we need to do. Anyway, I just wanted to say that in the run-up to the 15th of March, we got a statement that was just released on the website, and we simply just made a standstill. The Trades Council had some be rebuilt because of the cost of living crisis and in response to that. The statement went through that. Then we went to, from there we went to go to the unions, got 38 AU reps to sign the statement, plus people from the GMB, Unite, Nielsen, CW, RNT. It's quite a small thing actually, but it was important I think, because it is a network that we wanted to rebuild. We got community activists to do it. There are 3 independent socialist councillors and one Labour councillor. From that we got to say it will have the Western Line. I want to read it because I think there's quite a lot of confusion around the world of Labour because of the way they've shifted to the right, because of the role they've played in Palestine. But I think it's a brilliant statement. And I think we, as Weyman said, we must work with them. Haringey has a long proud history of welcoming refugees from across the world and standing united against the far right. At the Battle of Wood Green, it was the people of Haringey, anti-racist, trade unionists, activists, and the Labour movement which came together to beat down the National Front and say division and hatred are not welcome here. The spirit is needed now as it was back in 1977, and she talks about anti-racism day. She talks about the Tory, obviously the Tories who were in government then, and the hostile environment, and how proud she is of Haringey being diverse and welcoming borough. So I just think we need to go back to then. We're going back to those networks. We've got a stall next week. We've got some amazing land for the autumn, and we need to electrify really the networks that we have, because we are revolutionaries in all these things. Of course, we want to free Palestine, we want to speak back Farage, but actually we want to make connections between relative groups and bring together all the individuals that we can.
Hi, I'm a preschool comrade, and just some interesting things. First of all, brilliant introduction, brilliant overusing, and you hit so many of the things that we are questioning right now. I was in a meeting where somebody said at it's not going to be like the A&M. Totally agree. But don't forget the tactics of the A&L, which were brilliant. Genuinely behind said you can't assume all working class people are racist. Absolutely. But we were out on the streets, listening, debating. Every time you saw a socialist worker, you were out making the arguments. We were going into schools. There was a massive amount of stuff that we were doing, which was opening up ideas. And on a page there, what you say, okay, you normally support the refugees, but can I ask you, if you're in the middle of a war, and you like Children, and your city is going to get on by British bonds, what would you do? And it's not a frightening question, but it's a real question. What would every one of you do? But just a story, anti-Nazi, they tried to petrol my house in Nazi and various other things. But somebody earlier here said, don't forget everybody. I remember a Peruvian in George Aiken's gambling fund who told us that he funded the BNP. So you don't ignore that for everyone. He's pretty green repo. But what did we do? We split it, we got out there, and the gamblers there, many Jewish, many Indian, many East Asian, boycotted. They boycotted his club and we closed it down. It had an effect on it, we withdrew money from the BNP. So everybody counts, every party counts. That's the first message. I've got a question. I know these days, you're absolutely right, it's a bigger story. But we have been fighting with refugee organisations, particularly in Bristol, the fundraising up here. And I think there's a bit of a question about how do we work with people who are used to raising money for food, giving money for clothes, doing the health care and cleaning thing. How can we get them out into the street as how build women politics? And I think it would be easier to win the politics than the people who are on the streets of Palestine, because they're much bigger politics, much broader politics, and the students in the encampments and the LGBTQ+ group who are threatened by as far ideas go. But I would like some practical ideas about how we involve those people, because they are large numbers, particularly on unions, where the hotels are situated to take refugees. Do you know that they sack all workers? Because you don't need to be good attendants. You want people to be rude, so you don't need kitchen staff. So those are a group of people we need to get to, because there are some things taken away from them, not by refugees, but by the government. And it's those sort of arguments that are different and need to be fine-tuned. You can't use the same argument, use the same kind of off people. Everybody is a division. And I think that's the only way, but it's always another way to answer you. I've got a lot more to say. Plus, did anybody see that point? Glastonbury. Love music, hate, racism, fantastic event. We want more of it. And in Glastonbury, the idols of the Bristol band, they were the ones who had Free Palestine in the background, and they were the ones where Banksy launched his diggy with refugees in it. An image. We have to get back to theatre drama, but most of all, we've got to wake young people outside of the main where they screw is with music, TikTok, and with part of all of them.
Yeah. Lewis said that the process of racism from the top of society is going to accelerate. I see these next 5 years as critical. I do think it's going to accelerate, and I think it's going to be ugly. I'm very proud to be in an organisation wherever the far right does rear its ugly head, we are so dedicated to stomping it out, like we did in Barnsley, as my comrade George said. Nigel Farage basically went running with his tail between his legs. And it is so critical that we continue to build on this support and get more people involved in the movement, in stomping out far-right nationalism and fascism wherever it crops up. And if anyone here is going to go on or is thinking about going on the demo on the 27th, I highly recommend that you do. It will be imperative.
Yeah.
Young colleagues, you see, I just think just the result of the internal election on Thursday is a watershed moment for us. Not only is it the fact that in the 4 UK got 4 billion votes, but for the first time in little referendum, most have never achieved a block in Parliament of the hard right. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that, you know, you look there, as if we want to know what's going to happen in Britain, or the debates are actually in Britain, over the next 4 years. Nigel Farage has committed to 5 years of unremitting campaigning. And you only have to look across the channel to understand that 4 or 5 years ago, Macron, Scholz in Germany said, vote for us because we will stop the hard right. That is an utterly failing strategy now, and I'm dreading the results at 8 o'clock tonight, where it was the second round of the French election. And therefore, we are in a situation. Fascism is not knocking at the door of Britain, but it is stirring. And the hard right and the fascists together could transform British politics over the next 2 or 3 years. But I think that what the contributions from Barnsley, from Haringey, from elsewhere, showed that it is up to us to have the imagination. You see, we are not the only people who are worried about this. The people who did brilliantly, the independent candidates, those are people we should approach, and we should be bold about approaching it. So the 27th, this is our response of people who are to the left of Labour. And no matter any, in Islington, we've got Labour councillors who wouldn't even care to go forward. But I think it's going to approach every single one of those Labour councillors and say, arm the demonstrating with us. There are lots of people who will say, my God, after the election, there are people who are trying to pull together the opposition to the Nazis or to Farage. And I think Jeremy Corbyn is open to that. But we have to show him and his followers that we are going to be there, and therefore it's your choice whether you're going to be with us or stand to one side. And I think the atmosphere in this country is overwhelming. Things fall apart, the centre out of, and that's what we're witnessing. And we should take that message hard and clear, absolutely into the movement.
Hey, thanks for this, Weyman. I just wanted to start by about the kind of warning we see with the French elections. Obviously, there's not the whole picture. We've also seen, thousands on the screen in response all over France. But we got the first round election results. I've obviously not been repeated again tonight, what I believe results. But I just want to talk a bit about France and about kind of the major concessions that he makes us on Phobia, right across the left really, the country that it is across the cultural spectrum. So whether we're on the Hijab or, psychic practices have been a problem and so on. And I think this leaves the left in France who seem to believe rendered useless to argue against this and against the attacks on Muslims and migrants, refugees that legitimise and so on, and the normalisation of Islamophobia.
also legitimizing the likes of Le Pen and her politics, and it also allows them to run even further the racist agenda, and the anti-Semitic, at least that she pulls out the Islamophobic rhetoric. And I think it's also no surprise when we're talking about France that if the left, if you don't challenge racism, that is the far right that wins out in that scenario. I think it's also important what Weyman spoke about, that if we do not stand against racism and highlight every anti-racist attack, stand with every Muslim woman that gets attacked and so on, then there can be no unity with Muslims or migrants or refugees and so on to fight back together against the fascist threat in France. And I think that unity is not automatic here in Britain, but there is something different, isn't it? We have built unity against the far right. 1 minute. I've got it. Okay. But I think, obviously, there is a threat here as well that people spoke about the election and Farage and so on. And I think it is important that we oppose him and that every headline spoke about him getting heckled instead of it being his victory speech. But the Labour Party as well we have to talk about, because there's no question that Starkey is not going to challenge the racist environment that allows the far right to build and practice when they're throwing war, flames on the fire. And as well, we're not going to improve the lives of ordinary people. This is a dangerous polarisation and despair that can lead even further into the hands of the far right. I'm just going to end by talking about the Nielsen demonstration, because people said it was a massive task, and I think it is, but it's also a massive test. Because I think that for everyone in this room, we have to be thinking about how we're making that the biggest possible demonstration and the broadest one, wherever you are in the country, that you're bringing people down there into his direct confrontation with fascists on the street to say that they're not welcome. But it's also a touchstone, I think, and this is anti-racist, putting the marker down, it does drawing the line on the sand. But it's not the end. I think it's actually the start. It's about getting on the front foot for the battle that we see ahead. So I think it's crucial that we build a mass anti-racist movement that is militant, and we do that with a tactically smart approach, just pulling people together around the single issue of fighting racism and fascism. But it's also important that our politics are at the heart of the United Front and at the heart of our movement, because serious politics that goes beyond the despair and it has the hope for fighting for a better world, and it can draw it can link the struggles and witness in Palestine, Transvaal and so on, even though we don't have conditions of people coming into that struggle. But it's important that our politics matters and that it's there to point people to a different system that does not have racism, hard bacon, so it doesn't, but allows the far right to rise again and again.
I wanted to come back on what Lewis mentioned about the comments made by Mick Lynch about, if this is an argument that often comes up, it looks like these in various shades and forms about, we have to be careful not to patronise working class people. And I think, it should be said that obviously the RMT were one of the first unions to back the demonstration on the 27th of July, and the Mick Lynch did really well in calling Farage a racist and so on national television. That's very important. But I do think that behind that kind of question, I don't think it's patronising to be honest and argue with people. I don't think it's patronising to work in, we are working class people. I don't think it's patronising to raise arguments about the dangers of racism towards working class people. I think it's actually the opposite. And so I think every time we face these arguments, the dangers that we saw when these arguments came up in Llanelli in Wales was that actually always lots of people that are pulled around who are disillusioned and rightly upset and furious about what's happened with broken Britain. This is true, but when racism is a part of that picture, and when there's fascists that are mobilising and trying to use racism to manipulate people in that way, it is really important that there is a voice that stands up and says, I'm sorry, but this is racism and we have to challenge it. And so I think that's one of the lessons from history. I mean, if you look at the Italian Socialist Party and the trade union leadership during the rise of Mussolini, actually there was a union leader who had said people should stay at home and we shouldn't call out the racist and so on, and at the end they killed him and so on. So I think we have to understand that there's a wider process going on there. And the way that we do, I think, to come back on the comment who raised it earlier on about how we approach these arguments, is that we have to expose the fascists like we did around the 2018 rising movement, around the BNP, around the NF, expose that these people are actual Nazis, that they're trying to relate to wider racism and split them off from that softer racist base, and then try and whip those people away from racist solutions towards anti-racist ones. We're not in 1933. The fascists don't have the street movement. They don't have the level of big capital going into the markets that seem to be working out that they'll be all right and they'll adapt and so on. But I think, you know, we have to take this really seriously. And when we got to stand up to racism heckler number 3 or 4 the other day, and Farage went, oh, any more for any more, and we were sat there thinking, yeah, there's actually only 5 of us. We want to be in a position where there's another 100,000 of us all over Britain, all over internationally, that are going to stand up every single time and say, that's racist, that's divisive. No, we're not having it, we need to smash the nucleus, and we need to do what Mathieu from France said in this little last night when he said that the best way to stand with that fascists in France is to give Robinson a big chicken on the 27th of July.
Liz Truss, seeing the platform with Tom Robinson, should remember that this place, the former Prime Minister, this country shared a platform with Tom Robinson at one of those things. In other words, it's a ruling class that appears, and just a cheap shot as well, but, you know, the British ruling class should be the last thing in the world saying people should come in. They went around the whole fucking world. And then turn around and say that 400 years later, make sure none of the damage was done, people come in. No, we remind them of their own history, right up to Drax, right up to all of them. They have a history, and we need to remind them of it. That's one of the questions. That's what you say. How we win people by honest appeasement and apology, and then we'll win them to our side. And we're very quiet, we won't bring them away, That won't work. I'll be honest with you, my parents, when we went on the demonstration, and everyone was saying, they used to say, where are you going? We used to say, we're going to play football in the park. Because they would say, stay out of trouble, be respectable, dust your cap to the coppers, and all that kind of stuff. We broke from that. We went to the carnivals, we went for all those things, and that generation broke. You couldn't break the racism. Plus, when there's a racist in your classroom saying you shouldn't be here, you can't just say, I understand how you feel. That's not what we did. Yeah, I won't tell you what we did. We were bullies, we weren't. We explained really quickly to them. You can't say that publicly, yeah? Pretty soon they stopped saying it inside the classroom. And we want a whole group of soul boys and mods to come along to the AMH thing. But it was a tussle. When I went to West Cam, for my sins, I know people aren't there was a fight on the terraces. When you're on the terraces, we keep saying, pointing out to you, not watching the game, what you do there. And we literally had to fight in there, and we won. We had allies. We had people that did that. And we had West Hammers against the Nazis. In other words, we started from the one people. The Williams are up there, now there's others in Nathan's, right? We used to mix with the stars. When we organised, you know, Pete Doherty and all these big artists were on the phone. They used to answer your phone then. You rang them up. You need the dust balls that have to. But they're now starting to answer the phone. They're now starting to say, yeah, let's do something about it. We need to mobilise them as part of the cultural movement. Sierra Samaria Sigley is one of my heroes. Why? Because when they attacked, the first attempt for them to break into London actually wasn't around racism, it was around trans rights. That's the first time they tried to break in using that basis. The truth is, Turning Point and that Guy Fawkes was kicked out because we had mass demonstrations on the ground. By the way, you shouldn't forget, the police broke Jess's industrial organisers' streets in an attempt to make sure that they could attack drag queen story time. At the end of the day, we did win those battles. Now, I want to say that what did he say is a pessimism about the breakthrough against the far right and Tom Robinson? We've got a much bigger army, and to be perfectly honest, even legitimacy. You know, I know the TEC are slow and sclerotic, but they have signed up to support stand up to racism. That doesn't mean, to be honest, that we're going to go to NRMT station but go on the demonstration. That's not a job. But it will give us a letter that says you could do that. The head of the CWU will give us a letter that we couldn't do that. The AEU, we're based in the AEU offices, and Daniel Kabidi will give us a letter saying that 22,000 school in this country should support what we're doing. People say, can we bring the refugee movement? So Edward Sullivan from the Refugee Council, very respectful body, supports stand up to racism. And when people say, how do we fight back? We fight back by getting the voices of the dispossessed into our workplaces. You know what happened in the firefighters? It's not true that they all supported Anthony's. One firefighter went down on a rescue squad in Greece, and he wrote a book, and he talked about how the devastation of watching people drown in the grave. He had the whole of the fire, the whole of the conference in tears when he told his story. He won hearts and minds, and he also supports that aspirationalism. We have to get those stories out. We have to get the real stories out, because actually, when Farage and most people say shoot the refugees, other people listen to them, and they hear bakers, engineers, trailer drivers, people like us on those boats. And when they hear shoot them, they think of themselves. Farage thinks that was anyway. He would like to do that to the whole of our side. And so would the rest of the question of the far right. So I'll finish up with, people talked about how you build it. You build it to the grassroots with the electors that came out to at the bottom. But also there's an absolute rocket fuel in the Palestinian movement. Nader said it. I use it now, I hope it feels safe. I didn't want to expose you before, right? But Nader said it. One of the hearts of the movement alone are Muslim women who run the Palestinian movement. Imagine if we combine that with leading up to the anti-racist movement, and they became the heart of it. We could a revolution against the right does not just mean that we just fight back in one way. Don't forget, read Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell. It talks about a struggle against the fascist terror into a revolution. Read about what happened in France, when they first tried to break through, and they were pushed back. Read about Vienna, where they said better Vienna than Berlin, where the workers of Vienna took arms up against the Nazis. It's not automatic. We can break them and we can push back, but on one condition, that our class has got leadership. Steve Clymer, who's better known as, we have to work with him, yeah? So Steve Clymer, that's what he wants to do. He just wants to climb the stairs, and he does, my majesty, here, the Queen talked to me, they took this Bible on the phone to me, aren't I important? No, you're fucking useless, So working class people put themselves, as George Orwell said, in the saddle of history, and we've got the potential to do that. I'm going to stop now.
Well, probably substantive, but it does feel, when you look at Europe, that we're closer to the 1930s than we've ever been, to be honest. And some of the symmetry of it is chilling. I mentioned the AFD in Germany. The AFD have a poster which says Islam-free schools. The echoes of what happened in Germany in the 1930s, saying no Jews, no Jewish children in our schools, are therefore in the sea. What we have to recognise is that there's nothing automatic about this process. It has been the conscious decision of mainstream parties especially to turn towards hard racism, especially Islamophobia, which has given the AFD the space to put those kind of politics. But it's also true that we are living in a time of polarisation. You get flashes and glimpses of how, yes, there's been a rise of the right in response to the crisis in society, but also see the potential for the left to move. You see it in the struggle around Palestine, you see it in some of the strike movements we see in Britain and France, you see the support for people like Jeremy Corbyn, for Bernie Sanders, and for those kind of ideas in society. And our vision, I think, has to be one which would say that if we're going to win this battle, it's not about propping up the centre ground. The centre ground is what has got us to this place, got us to this situation in the first place. We won't beat Donald Trump by relying on Joe Biden, a man who I think can't remember his own name. He won't beat Le Pen by relying on Macron. And to be honest with you, Keir Starmer is not going to be the block that we need against Farage. So therefore, the vision about kind of anti-racist movement we need has to be one about how we can create an anti-racist movement in society to tap into the big numbers of people, much bigger than this room, who want to do something about it. And that requires action, and it requires leadership. And I want to touch on the question that people raise about Tommy Robinson, because you see, it is a credit to the amount of times we've had Smash Robinson that's had to reinvent himself yet again. Every time he's appeared, he was in the BNP, he was in the EDL, it was the Free Tommy movement, we smashed it every time. But we should remember that the beginnings of those mobilisations, we were often outnumbered. The first couple of demonstrations Wayne talked about being a car, the first couple of demonstrations, often their side was bigger. The way that we were able to mobilise bigger numbers is we had to make an argument into the movement. Into every workplace, every union, every campaign group, every refugee group, communities. We have to make anti-racism and anti-fascism cool again, without the anti-Nazi. That's what our music and racism is about. But in that, I think it's like what the comment in the video says. We are not saying to people that to fight Robinson and Farage, you have to sign up to everything that the Social Workers Party said. You don't have to agree with all of these slogans on the posters on the wall. If you want to fight racism and fight fascism, we want unity with you. You are welcome in our movement. At the same time, there will be arguments about tactics in that movement. Does our movement make concessions to the idea that there are good migrants and bad migrants? Does our movement make concessions to Islamophobia? Do we make concessions to the idea that we shouldn't call them fascists? Should we confront the Nazis on the streets, or should we hold a demonstration 2 miles away? And what wins out, what kind of politics wins out, will shape it. And the test of this is what's happening in France. Because in France, you have the potential for an explosive anti-racist movement. You've got the biggest Muslim population in Europe, the biggest Jewish population, and one of the biggest fighting lefts in Europe. Look how combative the French working class has been. Mass strikes in the last year, but we've also got the biggest fascist party in Europe. And why is that? Because in the argument in the anti-racist movement in France, it was a softer argument that weren't run out. Don't think there wasn't an anti-racist, there has been an anti-racist movement in France. An organisation called SOS Racisme. Big organisation. It called big mobilisations. But they didn't call her a fascist, and they wouldn't confront her. They wouldn't call protests at our conferences. They wouldn't call protests when she marched. We need a much stronger shield than that. And the legacy of the Anti-Nazi League, what we're trying to do is stand placing, that kind of shield is the strongest possible defence we can have against them. But alongside this shield, we need a sword. And that's why we need an organisation that can build the maximum possible unity, that can fight the sharpest politics of it, but can put the case about why, if we want to get rid of the racists and the fascists once and for all, it means taking on the system, and it means having sharp anti-capitalist politics. If you agree with that project, join us, because we have an urgent task, but we also have a big prize to win of a society where we'll never see the likes of Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson again.